I got out like a few months after I started doing stand-up. Drew Carey has been smiling on the price. Is right for over 17 years, but in early 2025, he finally said the words he had been hiding for most of his life. There were 2 suicide attempts before he was ever famous, a childhood loss he barely talks about and a family secret he has carried since he was a kid. What pushed him to speak now after decades of silence? And why did a man who makes millions laugh every day come so close to disappearing more than once? The truth behind that smile is darker than anyone could have guessed. Drew Carey was born on May 23, 1958 in Cleveland, Ohio. And from the outside, his story did not begin in a way that hinted at fame. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood, and when he was only 8 years old, life hit him hard. His father, Lewis Carey, died after a brain tumor. Years later, Drew said he could barely remember his father without sickness, which made the loss feel even heavier. The house was already under pressure, and after that, everything became even harder. His mother had to raise 3 boys on her own, and there was not much money or relief. Drew later said he felt depressed very early in life, and that sadness stayed with him through his teens and well into adulthood. What makes that pain feel even deeper is that some of it stayed buried for years. In his memoir, Dirty Jokes and Beer Stories of the Unrefined, Drew revealed that he had been sexually abused by a family member as a child. The book became a New York Times bestseller, but the most striking part was not the sales, it was the silence before it. He had carried that trauma for years before speaking about it openly. By 18, he had attempted suicide for the first time. Later, he said he felt angry that other people seemed happy while he felt empty. He also said he tried again in his early 20s, so the man the world would later know for making people laugh was once a young man who felt so low he believed nobody would miss him. That is what makes the beginning of his story hit so hard. Still, his life did not stop there. It turned in 1980 at age 22. Drew enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve. He served until 1986 and reached the rank of sergeant while working as a field radio operator with the 25th Marine Regiment in Ohio. That mattered because the Marines gave him something his earlier life had not. They gave him structure. They gave him routine. They gave him a hard system to live inside. When his inner world had been full of pain and chaos, for maybe the first time, he had an identity that was not built around loss. And from there, another strange shift began. Before he ever became a performer, Drew was already making people laugh in a quieter way. He started writing jokes for Cleveland radio DJ David Lawrence, who actually paid him for the work and pushed him to keep going. That push mattered. It gave Drew a direction. He did not jump straight into stardom. He studied joke books. He worked on his own material. He kept learning. Then he won an open mic contest, and that helped him become MC at the Cleveland Comedy Club in 1986. So his comedy career was not some lucky accident. It was built piece by piece, first with paid joke writing, then small club stages, then years of grinding in Cleveland and Los Angeles. The real breakthrough came in 1991, and once it came, everything started moving faster. That year, Drew appeared on HBO's 14th annual Young Comedian special. Then in November 1991, he performed on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. The set went so well that Carson invited him to sit on the couch, which was a huge sign of approval for any comic back then. That moment changed the temperature around his career. Carson had already shaped the futures of countless stand-ups, and now Drew Carey had his moment too. That same year, he also made his first appearance on Late Night with David Letterman. In the space of 1 year, he went from being a club comic to a nationally recognized comedian. Once Hollywood noticed him, it stopped treating him like just another stand-up trying to break through. In 1994, he got a development deal at Disney and landed his first scripted TV role in The Good Life, where he appeared in all 13 episodes. That was important because it pushed him out of the comedy club world and into network television. Then came the next leap. In 1995, he teamed up with Bruce Ford to create The Drew Carey Show, a semi-autobiographical sitcom set in Cleveland. It premiered on ABC on September 13th, 1995, and it quickly looked like a real hit. What made this rise even more impressive was that Drew was not just standing in front of the camera and reading lines. He was shaping material behind the scenes too. His 1993 HBO special, Drew Carey Human cartoon, was not only a performance special, he co-wrote it and executive produced it. Then in 1994 it won the Cable Ace Award for Best Writing. That win said something important about him. He was not just a funny guy with timing and a microphone. He could build material, he could guide it, he could own the voice behind it. And in Hollywood, that made him harder to replace. Then the Drew Carey Show really took off. It ran for 9 seasons and 233 episodes from 1995 to 2004, which is the kind of run most shows never even get close to. Drew was not only the face of it, he was also a co-creator, executive producer, and writer on 4 episodes. The success made him one of ABC's biggest stars during the late 1990s in the industry. Noticed. By 1998, he had already won the Satellite Award for Best Actor in a musical or comedy series. Then in 2000, audiences made their feelings clear. 2, when he won the People's Choice Award for Favorite Male Television Performer. That mattered because it showed he was not only respected, he was loved. He had moved from comedian to full-blown television star, and yet, somehow he was not done building. While the Drew Carey Show was still part of his life, he also became the face of improv television for an entire generation. He hosted and executive produced the American version of Whose Line Is It? Anyway, for 2 and 19 episodes from 1998 to 2007. That alone would have been enough for most people, but Drew kept going. He later pushed the same style of comedy further with Drew Carr's Green Screen Show in 2004 and 2005, and then with Drew Carr's Improvaganza in 2011, which ran for 40 episodes and was filmed in Las Vegas. That is part of what makes his career so unusual. He was running 2 major comedy identities at once. On one side, he had a hit sitcom. On the other, he had a hit improv franchise. Most entertainers spend their whole lives trying to become known for one thing. Drew managed to become strongly linked to 2, and when you place that beside where he started, the distance feels almost unreal. This was a man who had struggled with depression, attempted suicide twice, and had even been expelled from Kent State University 2 times for poor grades. Yet by February 21, 2003, he had a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The journey from a broken young man in Cleveland to one of the most recognizable names in American comedy feels almost too sharp to believe, but it happened. Then came another twist. In July 2007, Drew got the biggest television job of his life. He was chosen to replace Bob Barker as host of The Price is Right after Barker's final show aired on June 15, 2007. The official announcement came on July 23, 2007, and that was a massive moment because Bob Barker had hosted the show for 35 years. For many viewers, Barker was not just a host, he was the show. So stepping into that role meant walking straight into pressure, comparison, and doubt. And the backlash came with it. A lot of longtime fans were deeply attached to Barker. So Drew entered the job with many people already unsure and some openly against him. The transition felt sudden to viewers. It felt personal. But Drew took the job seriously. He learned every game, and that was a much bigger task than many people realized. The Price is Right is not just about smiling and talking. The host has to control energy, timing, pace, suspense, and the flow of dozens of moving parts every day. He had to earn trust while standing in the shadow of a legend. The surprising part is that he did exactly that. The doubts did not win. By 2025, Drew Carey had hosted The Price is Right for more than 17 years. In other words, he did the one thing critics thought he might not do. He stayed. And over time, he made the role his own. That kind of longevity is rare in daytime television, where burnout and replacement happen much faster. Drew even said he does not plan to retire quietly. In one interview, he used a blunt line that said everything about how deeply the job now fits him. He said, "I want to die on stage." And even that is not the whole picture. A lot of people know Drew Carey as a comedian and game show host, but fewer realize how much range his life has had before fame. He spent 6 years in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve from 1980 to 1986. Then in 2021, he was honored with the United States Navy Memorial Lone Sailor Award, and the award was presented during a live episode of The Price is Right on July 6, 2021. Drew has downplayed his service before saying he was just in the reserves, but the recognition made it clear the chapter of his life mattered. Then there is the sports side of his story. which feels almost random until you realize his life has never really moved in straight lines. Drew became a co-owner of Seattle Sounders FC, and while he was part of the ownership group, the club won the MLS Cup in 2016 and again in 2019, so the same man who became famous telling jokes and hosting a daytime game show also had championship-level success tied to professional soccer. That mix is rare, in fact. It is hard to find another career that holds all of this together so strangely and so cleanly. Drew Carr's life looked funny on the surface, but underneath it there was always something much heavier going on. Long before people saw him as the smiling host of The Price is Right, he was carrying pain that went back years. He later admitted that he had tried to take his own life twice, once at 18 and again in his early 20s. In one memory, he described being at a fraternity party surrounded by people who looked happy while he felt completely hollow inside. He also lived through deep loss early in life, including the death of his father when Drew was just 8. So even when success came, the darkness did not simply disappear, it stayed with him, only hidden better. That is what makes his later image so striking. By July 2007, Carey stepped into one of the hardest jobs in television when he replaced Bob Barker as host of The Price is Right. For most people, that alone would have been enough pressure to break them. It was one of the most famous daytime shows in America, and many viewers could not imagine anyone else standing in that spot. But Carey stayed there year after year, and by 2024, he had crossed 17 years on the show. He did not just survive in that role, he became part of it. And that made the contrast even sharper, because the man millions trusted every day was still fighting private battles the audience could not see. Then in 2010, another crisis hit, and this one forced him to act. Carey was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and the warning he got was serious. He said a doctor made it clear that if he did not change his habits, his life would be shorter. That was not the kind of news a person shrugs off. It became a breaking point. Carey responded by overhauling his routine, dropping around 80 pounds and going from a size 44 to a size 33. He followed a strict no-carb approach and committed to cardio at one point, doing at least 45 minutes a day. The result was not only dramatic weight loss. He later said he no longer needed diabetes medication. That is why this did not feel like some celebrity fitness phase. It felt like survival. But the change was not only happening in his body. Around that same period, Carey also started rebuilding himself from the inside. He said self-help books and personal development material helped pull him out of a deep mental hole. Writers like Wayne Dyer, Zig Ziglar, and Og Mandino became part of that process. And it was not a quick fix or a short phase, it became a lasting habit. That detail matters because it shows his recovery was not just about looking better or losing weight. He was trying to keep himself together in a much deeper way. On screen, he still looked like the calm, stable television star people knew. Off-screen, he was doing the hard work of trying to save himself. Even with all of that progress, his personal life kept bringing fresh wounds. In October 2007, Carey got engaged to Nicole Jarre. At the time, it sounded hopeful. Reports said they were excited about the future even though they had not set a wedding date. But that relationship quietly came apart in January 2012 after nearly 5 years together. What makes it more than simple celebrity gossip is that Carey stayed involved in the life of her son Connor even after the breakup. So this was not just the end of a romance. It was a real family shift and another emotional blow for someone who already carried more pain than most people realized. Then years later, another relationship entered his life and changed everything. In 2017, Drew Carey met Amy Harwick at a Hollywood party. He was 58, she was 35. Their connection moved fast. Carey later said their first date was at Disneyland, which already gave the story a strange, almost dreamlike quality. Within weeks, he was telling co-workers that if things kept going this way, he would marry her. He did not ease into the relationship. He fell hard. And for a man who had spent so much of his life wrestling with sadness, that kind of sudden hope must have felt enormous. By January 2018, they were engaged. Soon after, Harwick even appeared on a Valentine's Day episode of The Price is Right, where Carey introduced her on national television as his fiancée. That moment made the relationship feel public, solid, and headed somewhere real. Millions of viewers saw it as a love story moving toward marriage, but the picture did not hold. By late 2018, the engagement had ended, Publicly, the split was described as amicable, which made it sound calm and clean. Still, that kind of word can hide a lot. Carey later made it clear that his feelings for her had never really disappeared. What made Harrick stand out in the first place was that she seemed to live several lives at once. She was born on May 20th, 1981 in Sursville, Pennsylvania, and was adopted and raised in Lansdale. She graduated from North Penn High School in 1999. From there, her path never followed one simple line. While pushing through advanced education in therapy, she also worked as a personal trainer, bartender, go-go dancer, and Playboy model. Later, she became a licensed marriage and family therapist in West Hollywood, focusing on sex counseling, which is already a field that demands both confidence and emotional strength. In 2014, she published the New Sex Bible for Women and started appearing on podcasts and television speaking openly about mental health and sexuality. That combination made her hard to place in one box. She had glamour, seriousness, edge, and intelligence all wrapped together. That was part of what pulled Carey in so strongly. She was not just another relationship in his life. She felt different, and even after the engagement ended, the bond between them had clearly not fully died. In fact, the most haunting proof of that came in the final days before her death. On February 13, 2020, Harwick texted Carey and told him she had been thinking about forgiveness and would love to meet and talk. Carey replied that he would love that too, and he added 3 words that would later hit with devastating weight. I love you. At the time, it was just a warm answer to someone he had once planned to marry. Later, it became their last real exchange. Then came the night that turned everything into tragedy. On Valentine's Day weekend in 2020, Harwick had been out with friends in Hollywood. Police later said she returned home around 1-2 a.m. on February 15th. What happened after that was violent and fast. Her roommate heard screams and the sound of bodies hitting the floor. Harwick was later found about 20 feet below the balcony of her 3rd floor or Hollywood Hills home. She was still alive when discovered but badly hurt, and she later died at 3:26 a.m. at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. She was only 38. From the beginning, it did not look like a simple fall. Investigators found signs of a struggle inside the home. There were severe injuries and marks on her neck showing she had been strangled. A trail of rosary beads led from the TV room to the bedroom and then out toward the balcony. Police also found a syringe containing liquid, and prosecutors later said the liquid was nicotine, something that could be used as poison. All of it made the scene feel darker and more deliberate. This was not chaos in one awful second. It suggested planning. That is why attention quickly turned to Gareth Perrouse, an ex-boyfriend Harwick had previously accused of abuse. She had filed restraining orders against him years earlier, and according to reports, she had told friends she was frightened of him. So when police arrested him just 14 hours after Harwick died, the case already had a chilling shape. Investigators also said he had scratches on his neck, chest, and arms, along with a large bruise that looked like a bite mark. Those details pointed to a brutal struggle inside her home before the fatal fall from the balcony. Prosecutors later said he had broken in, waited inside, attacked her, strangled her, and then threw her over the edge. For Carey, the emotional damage was immediate and overwhelming. When Harwick was killed on February 15, 2020, he released one of the rawest public statements of his life. He said he was overcome with grief and asked for privacy. He also described their love as the kind people are lucky to have once in a lifetime. That is what made the response so powerful. He did not sound polished. He did not sound like a host reading lines. He sounded shattered. For a man who had already spent years hiding depression behind humor, this loss ripped everything back open. Production on The Price is Right was even paused for a time after her death, which showed how deeply the tragedy hit him and the people around him. And what made it all even harder was the cruel shape of the timeline. Their romance had moved fast. The engagement had made them look like a couple headed toward marriage. The breakup came, but not with public hatred. Then came that final text about forgiveness, a possible reunion, and one last "I love you." In another version of life, maybe that is where the story starts healing. Instead, it ended in violence just 2 days later. Carey later said that even before her real death, the breakup had already felt like a death. After she was gone, that feeling became something much worse. The legal case moved slowly, but it did move. In September 2023, after about 2 days of deliberation, a jury found Gareth Purus guilty of first-degree murder. The case also included burglary and a special finding of murder while lying in wait, which made the crime even more serious in court. Then in December 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That meant he would never be released. For Harrick's family and friends, it was justice after years of waiting. But for Carey, justice and healing were never the same thing. He later admitted that the conviction gave him closure, but not peace in the simple sense. He said Harrick was still with him always. And by early 2025, he was speaking more openly than ever about the pain he had carried through his life. That was when many people learned just how dark his past had really been. He revealed the 2 suicide attempts, described those moments as cries for help, and explained how deeply depression had shaped him. Fans who knew only the cheerful game show host were stunned. The man who had made a career out of laughter was admitting that he had nearly lost his life to despair more than once. At the same time, he also explained why comedy had always mattered so much. In a March 2025 interview, Carey said humor was his way out of darkness. He talked about processing tragedy through jokes and using laughter to break the spell of depression. Even when he was younger, suddenly his whole career looked different. Comedy was not just talent. It was not just work. It was a life raft. Even The Price is Right started to feel bigger in that light. Standing on that stage was not only about games prizes and spinning a wheel, it was part of how he kept himself afloat. And that strange mix has defined him for years. On one side, there is the public Drew Carey, the entertainer with a wildly unusual resume. He published Dirty Jokes and Beer, stories of the unrefined in 1997, and it became a New York Times bestseller. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve from 1980 to 1986 and reached the rank of sergeant. He entered the 2001 Royal Rumble and was later inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2011. He also became a minority owner of Seattle Sounders FC, a team that won MLS Cups in 2016 and 2019. It is almost too many versions of one person to believe at once, but on the other side, there is the private Drew Carey, the man shaped by loss, depression, health scares, broken relationships, and a tragedy he never fully escaped. That is why his story stays with people. It is not just the story of a comedian or a television host. It is the story of someone who kept getting hit, kept trying to rebuild, and kept finding ways to survive, sometimes through discipline, sometimes through books, sometimes through work, sometimes through jokes, but always through effort. And maybe that is what makes the whole thing land so hard. For years, audiences saw someone steady, funny, and safe. Then, little by little, the deeper story came into view. The suicide attempts, the diabetes diagnosis in 2010, and the 80-pound weight loss that followed. The broken engagement in 2012, the whirlwind romance with Amy Harwick in 2017, the engagement in 2018, the breakup later that year, the final loving text on February 13, 2020, and the murder on February 15th. Then the long wait until the conviction in September 2023, and the life sentence in December 2023. And finally, the confessions in 2025, when Carey let the world see just how close he had come to disappearing long before any of this.